this evening. Wow, isn't it fun? Can you think of any place you'd rather be than right here? I mean, if you had not been here, you would have missed a great meal, wouldn't you? And you would have missed this great music. And boy, you know, we are, of all people, I think most greatly blessed to be here this evening. So I want to thank you all. And I want to follow up. I want to say one more word about Miss Ida. And here's what I want to say. Lonnie said a wonderful testimony about her. But I want to thank you. And I want to thank Lonnie especially for being a friend to Miss Ida. Because I know that his friendship and your friendship enriched her life just as much as she enriched yours. And that's the way the kingdom of God needs to be. Amen? So I've always struggled with the psalm that says, precious in the eyes of God is the death of his saints. And I still struggle with that. But I can almost understand it with Miss Ida, can't you? All right, so we'll keep her, we'll remember her, and we'll keep her and her family in our prayers. I do want to add a quick note here. I've shared this with most of you, but we got a lot of folks to haul back this evening. So right after the service, I told the Kerr Street folks they've got to be ready. So I'm going to get them, and then I'm going to get the children. So the rest of you that I hold up here, I'm going to get you. I'm not going to forget you. I promise you. Is that okay? I promise. I won't forget you. But it'll be a few minutes. Okay, so don't get in a big hurry. I'll be back. All right? All right, good. How many of you like action movies? Anybody like action movies? You like action movies? What do you like about action movies? Special effects? The action? The action? I mean, Mr. Obvious here. You like the action? Isn't it amazing what they can do with special effects today? And just about anything. It seems so realistic, doesn't it? We have a few action scenes in the Bible that I think would make great movies. And I don't think this passage has been made into a movie yet, but it would make a great one. And as I read this, I want you to imagine what this movie would look like. Can you do that for me? I'm going to read this passage, and you think about what this scene would look like. Who would be a good director? Spielberg, he would probably do this well. So as I'm reading this from Isaiah 6, I want you to imagine this action movie, okay? You ready? The first 8 verses from Isaiah 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. And then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal from the altar. With it he touched my mouth, and he said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for. And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here am I. Send me. Now, would that make a great movie? Can you imagine the temple shaking, being filled with smoke, and the sound filling the temple? Man, that would really be cool. You know, that would be a great movie. The Bible has a number of stories like this, encounters with God, that are just as impressive and just as thrilling and would make equally good movies. I'm thinking of Moses and the burning bush. Now, that would be impressive to have been there. Ezekiel and his fiery wheel. Man, that was quite a story. And the transfiguration, the disciples up on the mountain with Jesus. And the day of Pentecost. Boy, those are stories that have action. They're full of imagery and power. These encounters with God are incredible. We read about them in the Bible. But it seems like today we live in a dry land. We don't see that many encounters with God like that. It seems like we're in a skeptical world. And those things don't seem like they happen. And the only way we can relate to them is by imagining them in a movie. But I believe that the encounters with God still take place. I've heard the testimonies. I've experienced it myself. And I think in this passage, there's a lesson for us to help us understand these encounters with God. In fact, I see a common theme. I see some parallels in all these encounters with God, whether the ones you see in the Bible and even the ones that we experience today. I see several characteristics that are common to all of those. Characteristics that we can relate to and help us understand, anticipate, expect, experience an encounter with the living God. The first characteristic, we see it in Isaiah, and it's common to every encounter I've ever experienced, anyone I've ever heard about. And it is this sense of awe. Isaiah was filled with a sense of awe at the power and the majesty of God Almighty. And if you read it, you sense that this awe even went to the point of fear. You know, the word terrific is related to the word terrible. And I think sometimes there's a fine line between terrific and terrible. And an encounter of God can be wonderful, it can be terrific, but it is so powerful that it can almost be terrifying. It was for Isaiah. And it has been for a lot of folks that I know. My wife and I have had the honor, the pleasure of visiting Yellowstone National Park. Now, Yellowstone National Park is a beautiful place. I've told her, I said, you cannot take a bad picture at Yellowstone. It is impossible. No matter where you look, you see something that is beautiful. You see something that is awe-inspiring. It is the most beautiful, incredible place I've ever seen in my life. But it's also one of the most dangerous. Because you have hot springs, you have geysers, you have mud pools, you have grizzly bears, you have buffalo. You can drown in the river, you can freeze in the winter. And if you're not aware of that, then you really haven't experienced Yellowstone. Because Yellowstone is dangerous. In a sense, it is a terrifying place to be. And to be in the presence of a living God can almost be terrifying in itself. Isaiah understood that. And every testimony I've ever heard from anybody that has a true encounter with God walks away with that sense of awe, first and foremost. They never walk away and say, oh, that was cool, let's do it again. They walk away and they say, sometimes they say, it was the scariest experience of my life. Now, we read in the Bible the phrase fear of God, and as preachers we tend to say, well, that's just symbolic, right? No, it's not. Because when you experience the pureness and the power, and we have a word for it, the holiness of God, it is almost overwhelming. My wife and I went to Cozumel a couple years ago on a cruise, and we took a little food tour and did some of the local food down in Cozumel. Maybe Edwin can kind of confirm my story here. Okay, you listen to this. You tell me if I'm on the right track. All right. They served us some local tacos there, and with it they had some salsa. And they said to us, "Now I want you to understand," they said, "this is not your American salsa. Your American salsa is diluted. It's weak." He says, "This is the real stuff, and you better be careful with this stuff." And they were right. Sometimes our God is so diluted that he's harmless. He's not impressive anymore. He's just a big old cuddly teddy bear. But when you encounter the true and the living God, you walk away with this sense of awe and this sense of holiness. And that's what Isaiah did. That's the first characteristic of an encounter. Did I do okay, Edwin? Am I right? Can you make some salsa that'll shake me up? I bet you could. Awe at God's majesty and his pure holiness. The purity is overwhelming. That was Isaiah's first response, his first takeaway from that encounter. But the second one goes immediately after that. It always does. It always does. The first thing we realize is the sense of awe of God, God's bigness, his majesty, his power. The second thing we realize immediately is our own unholiness, and our own smallness, and our own weakness, and our own impurity, and how broken we are. You cannot experience God's holiness without recognizing and contrasting his holiness with our weakness and our insignificance. Isaiah says, "Woe is me," he says. Woe is me. And when we experience God, we're always knocked to our knees out of a sense of humility and brokenness, because we realize we're in the presence of a holy and a pure God. Conviction is an important part of any experience with God. I'm reminded of an old cartoon about Hagar the Horrible. You remember Hagar the Horrible, the Viking? I remember Hagar, the cartoon in the comic strip in the paper. And Hagar was sitting there with his little friend that had the funnel hat. You know, the little guy with the funnel hat? And the little guy with the funnel hat, I don't know his name, he said, there at this night, he said, "Look up at the sky, Hagar. You see all those stars up there?" He says, "What's that make you think about?" And Hagar thought about it. He said, "It makes me realize how big I am and how little they are." Hagar had not had that encounter. When we have an encounter with God, we realize how big he is and how little and insignificant we are. That doesn't make us feel good. That's a conviction that can destroy us and destroy our pride in ourselves. If the story ended there, it wouldn't be a very good ending. There wouldn't be any happily ever after. But Isaiah's story did not end there, and neither does ours. Because immediately after we have this sense of our own brokenness and our own unholiness and our own weakness, we immediately have this sense, this awareness of God's grace and his mercy and his power to redeem and forgive. And God takes us down into the depths, and then he brings us back up again. The angel that brought the coal to Isaiah's lips, and he said, "This coal has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away." And the emotions that come from that encounter with God are almost too much for us to bear. And everybody I've ever talked to that has a true encounter with God immediately realizes that he has been forgiven, that he has been redeemed, that he has been restored and brought back. God never leaves us in that broken state. Oh, he takes us there so we can realize it. Because what good would forgiveness be if we didn't have an understanding of what we needed to be forgiven about? God takes it down into the depths of confession and despair, and then brings us up by his grace. What's the favorite hymn in the United States? Amazing Grace. It has a number of great lines, but one of them that I think is maybe the best one. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. It was grace that brought us down. It was grace that made us realize what we were missing. It says, and grace my fears relieved. What a wonderful story. What a wonderful promise. What a wonderful encounter. And we could end the story right there. And we could all go home early. Jack, what's the likelihood I'm going to end it there and we all go home early? You think I'm going to do that? No. No, I'm not going to do that. Because Isaiah's story didn't end there. Our story doesn't end there. An encounter, a true encounter with God always brings us up to that point of forgiveness, redemption, and hope. More than hope. Assurance that God can restore us and redeem us. Even me. Even you. But Isaiah's story didn't end there. Because there are two more steps that always accompany a true encounter. It says, the voice of the Lord said, whom shall I send? And any true encounter with God always involves a call upon us, a demand upon us, a goal, a purpose, a mission for us. God does not reveal himself just to entertain us. God does not reveal himself to amuse us or to make us feel good. He calls us. He reveals himself to us because he has something for us to do. And he said, whom shall I send? And that's what he says to us. So when we have this encounter with God, and I hear this from people, I had this wonderful encounter from God and it was great. And sometimes I think to myself, uh-oh, here it comes. Here it comes. God's going to put something on you. If you've had an encounter, you know that feeling. God has put something on you. And the last step, the last characteristic of a true encounter is our response to that call. Isaiah said, here am I. Three of the most dangerous words that you could ever speak. Here am I. Don't say it unless you mean it. Here am I. Here am I. God's encounter always brings with it some sense of dissatisfaction with the status quo. A sense of purpose that we are called to do something. To the point where we don't even have a choice anymore. 14 years ago, I said, here I am. To God's call. He called me into the ministry. I thought to myself, what in the world am I doing? This is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my whole life. Am I crazy? Me? I'm still afraid that somebody's going to find out I'm a phony. But that's what it takes. God calls us, woos us, and we respond. Sometimes, and we better respond before we think, because if we think about it, we're not going to do it anymore. But that's what an encounter with God does. He tells us, come, I got a job for you. Yeah, I got a job that only you can do. That's why I'm revealing myself to you. Now, are you going to come with me, or are you going to walk away from this encounter? It's hard to walk away, isn't it? It's hard to walk away from a true encounter with God. But a true encounter with God will change your life. It will transform you. We got a closing song? Do we? Well, come on up here, guys. I want you to get ready for us. Well, and I need a little background music here. We don't always experience big, extra large encounters with God like Isaiah did. But I believe they're out there. I believe they're waiting for us. Sometimes our encounters are not extra large. They're sort of petite, you know. But don't let the drama of Isaiah's encounter minimize the significance of your encounter. Because your encounter is important. Your encounter is just as important as Isaiah's. And yes, we live in a dry land, folks. We live in a land where encounters don't happen very often. And we can't create them. You know, if we had the money, and Smokey could probably help us with this, we could get a smoke machine, right? And we could get lights, and we could get a surround sound system, and we could make this place shake, couldn't we? And we could create the illusion of an encounter. But that's all it would be. That's all it would be. And I'd much rather have a small, genuine encounter than a big, phony one. That's right. And maybe that's what a sermon's all about, is cultivating, preparing the soil for those little encounters. They don't have to be huge. Listen for God. Listen for His voice. Let Him shake up your life just a little bit. I believe that God's waiting to encounter some of you out here this evening. Maybe it's not huge. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I want to help you with that encounter. We don't live in a dry place, folks. I think God's speaking to some folks right now. He says, I want to talk to you. I want to reveal myself to you. And I want to help you with that. As our band closes our evening tonight, if you have had such an encounter and you want to remember that, come with me. I want to pray with you. If you feel like right now God's calling you up and saying, I've got something to say to you, and maybe you're a little bit scared. Well, if you're a little bit scared, you probably ought to be. It means that you're in the right mood. Because an encounter with God can be scary. But it can transform your life. Are you ready to have your life changed? Are you ready? Is your life good enough the way it is? Or do you want something more? As they close us, I'm going to invite you. Y'all will, any of you will. And if nobody comes up, that's fine. It's not going to hurt my feelings. It really won't. I'm not looking for numbers. Maybe. But if it's one, that's fine. If you want prayer and you want to have that encounter, as Smokey and the guys close our service, I'm going to invite you to come on up. So guys, go ahead and close us out here, and we will have our own little encounters out here, okay? All right. Lord, we take hope in the assurance and the promise that you are forever mine. You are forever ours, Lord, and you're with us. Be with us, Lord, as we leave this place. Protect us and guide us until we meet again. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, go in peace. Amen.
Amen.